Good morning, Doug.
Hello, how's it going?
Doing well.
Good. All right, let me get organized here.
How's life on the East Coast? You guys getting lots of rain?
Yes, it's excellent. I love it. And lots of good thunderstorms too. I mean, the dog hates it, but I love it. I love a good thunderstorm.
Yeah, I missed the rain on the West Coast. I think it's burning up, so we could probably use it. But it's I'll be out in your area probably next week, Monday through Wednesday, a little bit north of you. But it's we're starting to do work back in the office again. So
cool. Let's see. Hey, Tommy.
Yo.
Yo. And Ginger.
Hey, Doug.
Hello. Okay. Meg keeps pushing it out. He gives me all these wonderful excuses. Let's see. Last week, he lost his child. This week, he has a dentist appointment. So I don't know if I'm starting to believe him or not. He's just making this crap up as he goes along. But it's funny. Hey, Lucas.
Hi.
And Scott.
Doug.
Hey. Oh, he vanished. Hey, Klaus.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Lance.
Hello.
Oh, hey, Eric.
Hi, Doug.
Hey, kind of weird. Expected at least Daniel and Clemens since they have PRs in the hook. Let's see. All right, let's see. Hey, Daniel.
Hello.
And no Clemens yet. I'm missing. Oh, there we go. Mauricio.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Doug.
And
Thanks for
Clemens.
having me.
Yes, hello.
Did you feel my mental, where is Clemens nagging? Is that what it was?
No, I just came out of a meeting. I'm also sick, so I'm trying to just, not to be too active today.
Got it. Okay. Hey, Christoph.
Hi.
Hey, gotcha. All
But
right.
I'm still here, Doug, to support you.
I appreciate that. Well, the reason I was wondering whether you're going to make it or not is because you did open a PR, so I thought you'd want to talk about that. So
Yeah, I'm not sure how coherent I am today, but pretend that I'm not here unless you really need to raise the alarm.
okay, we'll do. Let's see. How are you there?
Hello.
Hey, and Ryan.
Yes, hello.
Excellent. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I think I got everybody on the list. Yeah, looks like it. Okay. Clemens, I'm sorry to pick on you.
Okay,
Did you add this done right here?
I did.
So do you think this one's done?
Yes, there was already some language around errors.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it was a little weird in that spec with errors because the Slinky put in some rather strange error construct, and I think we convinced them then to go and fix that, and I think the AI just ended up sitting there.
Perfect. Okay.
What we wanted is if there's an error, it evaluates the faults, and that's ultimately now what the spec says.
Cool. Okay, just want to double check before I erased it. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anything from the community people want to bring up that's not on the agenda? Okay, technically this week is the SDK call. Last time I checked, there was nothing there. So if you have something, please add it. I'll double check before the end of the meeting. If possible, I would like to have a very short interop call after this one. If people can stay on the line, if you're interested in doing an interop stuff there. So please just quickly stay on for that one. Haven't heard anything. Oh, due next Friday. Okay, Project Pavilion. I didn't realize it was due this Friday. Or tomorrow. I'm assuming we want to do a virtual booth. Does anybody think we should not? I'm assuming I could strong arm somebody to attend at least part of it, or at least, I'm sorry, the 1 45-minute session. Does anybody think that's a bad idea? Okay. Okay, I'll sign up for that. I think we should do that. Any comments about what we should, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ginger.
No, Doug, I think the Project Pavilion stuff and all, I think isn't until next. I think it's the 27th.
Okay, well, if I don't do it tomorrow, I'll forget. So I'm gonna do it.
Well, I don't know if they're allowing us to schedule project office hours yet.
Oh.
So the email came out and said something about they had done the interest form. Now it's time to sign up for the project booth if you're going to have a virtual or in-person one. And then I think office hours. I think all of that is on the 27th, but I'll check my email and get back to you if it's different.
Okay, thanks. I still have the email, it's just way back there, but yeah. Okay, thank you. KubeCon China. Does anybody want to volunteer to do the cloud events / serverless working group update on that one? It's only a 35-minute session and it will be virtual, I believe. Okay, not hearing anything yet. We have a little more time. So think about it. It'd be great if we can get somebody who has not done it before just to share the experience. Okay. Anyway, think about that. Let's see, I don't see Timur on the call. All right, Klaus. Oh, Klaus, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to switch the order here. So Jem just pinged me this morning. He won't be able to make the call, but he wants to know from the working group, is there actually interest in him continuing on with his XML format specification? Or was it just more of a interesting sideline thing? Does anybody want him to continue or does anybody not really care? Yeah, there you go. Anybody have any opinion one way or the other? Okay, I'll let him know there's no opinion, then it's his choice. All right, so Klaus, you said you wanted to do a presentation on discovery. Would you like to share your screen?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, let me stop sharing. There you go.
I hope you can see my PowerPoint window now.
Yes,
okay.
we can.
Oh, that was already a lot smoother than the last time I tried to do that. Okay. Yeah, so I'd like to talk about something I call scopes. but just maybe lack of a better terminology. I think the term scope is fitting, but it's also a very generic term. So if later we find a better term with all of you with your expertise and native speakers assembled, maybe we find one. But for now, I'll call it scopes. And scopes, I mean, the idea arose from the discussions Clemens and I have been having for quite a while now. I think that's been mentioned a few times already. There are also those GitHub issues Clemens created around channel ID and discovery events. And some of the challenges we are facing in the discussions is, and that are, I think, supposed to be tackled by cloud events, that event infrastructures also cross organizational boundaries. And I mean, fostering interoperability is one of the goals of cloud events. Events are propagated across multiple nodes. So, I mean, we have the protocol bindings and everything in place for cloud events that are really great for this. And something that is typical in the cloud is that you have shared resources. And yeah, scopes, to make it short, are the idea to help solve these things. By the way, I have some echo there.
Hey, can people go on mute if you're not talking? There you go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so yeah, not to go through these things again, scopes come to the rescue, I would say. I used some of the icons Clemens has introduced before. So the upper four have already been in his presentation. I added 3 more for a sender, a receiver, and of course the scope. And I'll try with a simple example. You could say it's the eventing monolith, maybe. So just a single producer sending events to a consumer. And in addition is also exposing a discovery and a subscription endpoint. It's of course a bit of an artificial example, maybe something like the hello world of eventing. But in this case, you also have there more implicitly already something I would call a scope. So the set of events this producer is exposing to that single consumer. In this case, it's hard-coded and really implicit, or maybe a simple configuration file, something like this. But of course, things get a bit more complex. At some point, you might have something like an intermediary in the middle, a broker maybe. And then those endpoints for subscription and discovery go into that intermediary. That's one of the things it's providing, one of the services. And what you see here now is that you have already 2 scope symbols in this diagram. There's still this original scope, the set of events the producer exposes. But in addition, there is some administrator for the intermediary that may define policies or something like this. What is the consumer is supposed to see. So, and that might not be the exact same scope already. And going to a bit more of complexity again, if you have multiple consumers, those scopes being exposed to those consumers might differ. There might also be other reasons to separate, to have different scopes if you have an infrastructure with, I don't know, topics or event logs. That might also be a reason to separate the events in multiple scopes. Or if it's about authorization, such a scope might even have its own OAuth scope, so that consumers request an access token for a specific scope to access it. And if you have multiple producers, then those scopes, you take essentially the superset of those scopes these producers have, and can then again create different subsets of this to expose this then to the consumer. And something else, these scopes on the intermediary also link this set of services and events, also with subscription details that are actually specific to the intermediary and not related to the producers. So this is now going into the direction of that channel ID we had. Even a single producer might decide to have multiple scopes. A simple example might be that it's using one and the same broker to expose events that are somehow supposed to be separate. Maybe they should go into separate logs or are flagged as internal to be consumed by other services from the same application, and external to be exposed to the outside. Or of course, you can might also have application tenants. So if it's a multi-tenant application, the important thing here is I have now these arrows that depict a multiplexed connection. So events and also discovery content belonging to those different scopes is communicated over the same connection, essentially. And speaking about multi-tenancy, here is now this example where you have those multiple tenants. And it's also an example Clemens had in his presentation, I think. There's also now this multi-tenant or this tenant bridge in the middle that is now dispatching events that have been published in a multiplexed way into the different consumer tenants. You can see also that there are administrators that are responsible for eventing in those tenants that now maintain the scopes specific to these tenants. So they now can create policies what consumers can see inside the tenants. These might also be multiple consumers. I have not to overload the diagram, just put in there a single consumer in each tenant. But again, you might have now multiple scopes and consumers also per tenant again. So that's also an interesting thing, because original multiplexing has happened where you had a scope per tenant, but again, inside the tenants, you could create then for that next hop downstream different scopes. That's also an important property of this scope concept, that it's only meant to be for a single hop in this event stream. And yet, it's even possible to make it more complex. You can have a federated example with 2 intermediaries. And of course, that's somehow also motivated by what Clemens and I have been discussing over the past months. So this multi-tenant application on the left-hand side publishes events to multiple of its tenants in the first intermediary, and then those intermediaries, they are coupled in their own context in the middle and forward events belonging to different tenants. And you can see here, there are those tenant administrators on both intermediaries. Then the tenant bridge dispatching those events into the single tenants is then on the right-hand side. So some examples where scopes can occur. So although that those thoughts came from the discussions we had, I think scopes are something that occurs in a lot of places where you have messaging or event-driven infrastructures. So you could even think of just events that are emitted by Kubernetes clusters. There is this, I think by now famous GitHub issue suggesting that Kubernetes events should be also cloud events. If you think of the events belonging to certain namespaces as scopes, that could be a decision to do this. If you had an infrastructure where you federate multiple Kubernetes clusters, you could then further downstream also mix events from multiple clusters, but decide to create scopes for regions or different applications and all kinds of things. In Knative eventing, although I haven't been looking at that project for a while now, I think there is this concept of brokers. And also those brokers could be scopes. And on the inbound side of Knative eventing, you could think of a new source being created whenever a new scope becomes available from a certain messaging infrastructure. And just plain concepts from well-known messaging infrastructures like ActiveMQ or Kafka, they could also, even there you could use scoping. So one example of how, I mean, this is really not detailed out, just brainstorming, how discovery events could be used, also events about scopes. This is this multiplex example again, just part of this. So you see on the top, you have one discovery endpoint that has a dynamic set of scopes available. So it's also able to notify the other side when a new scope becomes available. And so in the beginning, a new scope is created by some operator maybe, and this event, the scope created event, is now sent to the other side. So that the maybe depends really on the infrastructure and the workflow you have in place, but maybe an operator sees that there's a new scope available and has to activate something or create resources on the other side to make use of that additional scope. And could then, once that happened, could then subscribe to discovery events for that scope. So whenever new services and their events become available in that scope, a notification should be sent. And that's then what happens on the third row. Then inside that scope, now a new service is exposed, and this discovery event, service updated event here, is then sent to the right-hand side. And of course, you can, that's also been part of this more complex scenario, you can really think of scopes also in topologies. That's what you can see here. As I said, scopes are intended to be just a thing that is exposed by one hop or one node in this graph for the downstream nodes. And for on each step and on each node, you might have different scopes. As in the example before with Kubernetes, on one level you had the namespace scopes maybe, and on the next level you had regions or something else that would be inside a certain scope. In addition, someone is of course at the beginning of all this defining services and how they look like and their events, and that's then what I would call the authorities defining these. And here it's one authority per scope, but you could also have scenarios where you have a central authority, maybe in a certain organization. That's really very much the same idea as described in the draft for the schema registry. And exactly that's then the point of this diagram. So on the left-hand side, I try to describe the model we have. I think so far in discovery, you have a single discovery endpoint where you can retrieve discovery data about a certain set of services, and services are identified by unique ID and contain then subscription details and events. One thing I see here that makes this difficult for federated scenarios is that the subscription details change on each hop. So you would have to change the service in this model on each hop, which is conflicting with this concept we have with the epoch, I think. In addition, we just have this single unique ID for the service. Would be, I think, a nice feature to have the same concept in place for services, for identifying them, as we have for the schemas, where then on the right-hand side you can see it. You have then equivalent to what we have for schemas. You would then have a service URI that could contain an authority and a service ID. And the same thing as for schema, where the authority was optional, I think. So in the simple case, it would still be just the ID, more or less. And something to decouple service and subscription details would then be, yes, the scope, of course. The scope belongs really to the discovery endpoint. That's the difference in notation here also. That's a containment relation you have for the discovery endpoint. Links to a certain set of services, and the subscription details are also specific for a single scope. So that it's, of course, then also different on each node. So some ideas around this. Yes, async API. I think there have been questions around async API a few times already. So far, we have thought of subscription details just as pointing to a certain subscription endpoint where we provide the subscription API as it is defined in our spec. But an alternative could be also to provide as subscription details an async API document, enabling then the native subscription capabilities of certain protocols like AMQP or MQTT and so on. I think as this is also specific to a single node, I think this scope idea and the async API concept would here really fit nicely together. In addition, you could have something like discovery of discovery events. So there could be a specific scope being specified by us that would describe if a discovery endpoint also provides discovery events or even scope events. I mean, those scope created events are certainly not necessary for all discovery endpoints, as you don't always have this dynamic set of scopes. And it's important to also support the simple use cases where I started with my presentation. So this could be distinguished by this discovery of discovery events. And I think it's also related to the action item I just saw in the minutes document in the beginning of this meeting that I have. So yes, are there any questions?
All right, Ryan, your hand's up.
Yeah, I guess if you could attempt to concisely define scope, what would that definition be? And looking at this from the perspective of I'm a developer, I'm going to implement this spec that has this scope idea. I'm just a little bit fuzzy on exactly what scope should represent.
Yeah, actually, I'm also still struggling with the exact definition.
Can you
might map? Yep.
Can you go to the most consolidated picture where we have everything? I think this one. Yeah. So if you imagine the business app on the left side, and that business app is without being too specific, let's say this deals with personal data records, right? Think of customer. So it now it edits customer records, and it edits shipping address, and it has further personal information, banking data. So just a normal, regular business application with a rich data model. So internally, so let's take at the left side of this, the left intermediary. Internally within that application, events are being raised for all the changes in all the tables. But there's PII there, there's information which you probably don't want to go and leak out to external applications. So you can think of the scope as a profile and if you will, a filter over all the events that are available. So let's assume that there's 500 events which are available, which are raised, some internal in codes and some are external. And then you are creating a profile of 50 events which are willing to export and to publish. I think that's what a scope is. Is that right?
Okay, so it sounds like what you're describing is more, I think what I was trying to answer in my own head is this more categorical versus like, does it represent the domain? It sounds like it's more categorical.
Yeah, and we're struggling with finding a better term than scope, because it might depend on so there are 500 events which you can publish, but which events are actually being published to the outside depends on authorization, might depend on what kind of product you're buying, and the product tier you're buying might depend on all kinds of different things. And you are effectively packaging available events by those external criteria. And you also might be publishing them by those criteria. And then that might also be per tenant. And that's how this comes around. There's multiple dimensions of constraints, which are then ultimately determining how many events you're publishing for a particular scope. Klaus, is that how you think about it?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Just want to go and confirm this. So in this case, you have the producer is really a multi-tenant application. It's one large app which has many different tenants, which has in itself feature switches, and customers buy into tiers by then enabling feature switches. And based on the combination of feature switches and who that is, you will go and have different information about events that can be ultimately consumed and subscribed to. And what we're trying to do here is effectively get that information, right? This subset of 25 events which are even available for subscription, propagated towards that on the other side to that intermediary, so that the consumer, which the developer who's building the consumer, they will ultimately need to go and decide what to subscribe to, and they will go to a portal and they will see a drop-down list of available events, right? And so they should not see 500, but they should see exactly those 25, which are available for that particular consumer, giving all the constraints. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. And this is something that the organization I'm in actually faces, where we have events that need to be exposed to certain parties or certain domain boundaries, but not to others. For example, internally versus exposing beyond the internal interfaces. So I think that context makes sense.
And there's the extra war tier, which makes this even more complicated, is this tenant bridge in the middle, this weird black symbol that we have there. Yes. Which is caused by these two worlds here, the intermediary on the left and the intermediary on the right, to be parts of completely different identity systems, right? And in the concrete case, to make this very concrete, I mean, it's no secret where Klaus and I work. There's SAP on the left side and there's Microsoft on the right side, and we have a flip side picture where it's exactly the opposite. And if you want to go and make this flow work, you either have a single notion of identity and role-based access control, and you have effectively, this role-based access control stuff work on both ends, which we started with in the belief that that's possible. And then we ended up with the insight that having a user act on the right side, and then be able to go and cause things to happen on the left side, and have that to happen under the same identity, is practically impossible. And that is for organizational reasons, and it's also because the identity stuff just gets brutally complicated to do so. So what this tenant bridge does is, and that's what we're explaining in that issue, is to effectively keep the identity realms and all the permission management completely separate, so that and this is what this editing does on the right side. These editors, the administrators on the right side, they're effectively you have another set of permission rules on the right, where you are getting 25 events from your customer management application on the left, and you can have those 25 events, but then your consumers that you have might not be all that powerful to go and be able to receive all those events, but they only may only be allowed to have a subset of like 8 of those events, right? And to further allow that management, you need to have effectively role-based access control and authorization models entirely on the right side, but the identities that are being used on the right side are completely unknown to the other side, and that's why we need to have this complete separation of these identity systems, and that's what the bridge does.
Okay, my hand's up. What I'd like to do is time box this to 5 more minutes, if that's okay, because we do have other things on the agenda, and we obviously can have more conversations on future phone calls as you guys sort of nail down exactly what you're looking for in terms of changes, specs and stuff. But I guess my question is, if I understand what you guys are talking about here, it does sound like filtering isn't the right word. It sounds like some sort of subsetting mechanism, as you were describing there at the end there, Clemens, right? A consumer on the right-hand side should only see certain things when they query the discovery endpoint, whether it's the list of services, whether it's the list of events in each service. There should be some sort of filtering done by who the person is that's doing the request. I think that's what at least some of this boils down to.
Yes.
And what I'm trying to wrap my head around is, I guess in my mind, I always kind of assumed that was sort of a problem for the discovery endpoint to solve. But it sounds like you guys are saying maybe there's some sort of standardization here we should do around this. Do I have that right?
Yes, we need to have standardization around this because it's a problem that SAP and Microsoft need to go and solve in a way that is not proprietary, right? From the Microsoft perspective, right, I want to build a mechanism that SAP can use, but that also everybody else can use.
Right.
Because that the problem of having these multiple scopes or different offers of events is something that not only SAP has, but also Dynamics has, and Salesforce has, and all those all the complex business systems all have that problem, that they have different features, different tiers, different tenants, different policies that are being implemented by the customers, and some have this module installed and some of that module installed. So even though the events are about the same thing, they are about whatever the total CRM system. What shows up in a particular scope that consumer is that one consumer is interested in, because the consumer really is interested in one of those tenants, right? That is always different. That is what the slide doesn't say well, arguably, is that the producer sits in a context that is for Contoso Corporation as a customer of SAP, and then the consumer also sits in a context that is for Contoso Corporation as a customer of Azure, which means that the consumer is staring at the Contoso instance over at SAP, which is theirs, right? But the complexity here is that the Microsoft system being multi-tenant and the SAP system being multi-tenant, it need to basically go and negotiate what that customer can see and can't see, and what that possibly that same person, that same Contoso administrator does on the left side, right? If they say, I am going to expose 25 events out of 500, then they expect that on the right side, in the Azure portal, when they open up the drop-down box, only 25 events show up.
Right. Okay. That helps. Okay, I have other questions, but I'm going to let Ryan ask the last one before we have to move on.
Yeah, I think it's just a general comment. I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think it would be great to standardize here. My feeling is like this, like the last 10 minutes of describing what this is trying to solve is probably how it should be framed, and not so much about scopes, but about authorization and visibility of who is able to see and subscribe and get events given whatever context that they're in. So that just might be a better, a good way to frame it. I do think I do see that as a problem, and something that I think would be interesting to explore building standards around.
Okay,
It's just
cool.
while I've been preparing these slides, I happen to see that this kind of scoping is happening already a lot in a lot of places if you look at it, and it's not always just about authorizations, and it's certainly not only about multi-tenancy. As I mentioned in my examples here, you could even see just a single Kafka topic as a scope. If you provide a discovery endpoint for events being provided by a Kafka broker, then you could even model it that you browse the scopes and then see what you get from which topic.
Yeah. Okay. Any last questions or comments? Okay, so I assume in terms of next steps, you guys will come back with like concrete proposals for how you'd like to see the specs change to support this, or are you guys thinking additional specs? Which one is it?
Well, it's certainly the discovery spec.
Okay.
Might also touch some of the others.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'd be curious in seeing the concrete proposals that you guys come back with, because that will at least help me solidify it in my head in terms of, understanding it all. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. All right. So, no, hold on a minute. I lost my list of people. There we go. Daniel, good, you're still there. Daniel, I was wondering if you could quickly summarize the changes since last time on this one. I personally only had a chance to read it right before the call here, so I would love it if we can have at least another week to review it. But I want maybe you can at least give a high-level summary of the changes you made.
Yeah, sure. So, shoot, I actually kind of forget exactly what changes I made since the last version of this PR. But overall, what I did was I tried to let's see. I tried to clarify the serialization versus deserialization sections. So I actually introduced use subsections there, and I tried to again kind of clarify the steps. There are kind of three cases here. There's binary case, there's non-binary but JSON related, and then there's non-binary and non-JSON related. And what serialization and deserialization looks like for each of those three cases. Beyond that, I'm not sure what to say. I would just suggest rereading it and seeing if it makes more sense. Looks like John Skeets spent some time reviewing it a few hours ago. I'm just kind of going through now and reading his comments. He brings up a few questions that might be worth discussing, but I also imagine that that some of them might turn into longer discussions. So I'm wondering if it still makes sense to for discussion at this point to remain in GitHub comments.
Yeah, like I said, if unless we're in a really big hurry, I prefer to give people another week to review it. I did, like I said, I skimmed it right before the call, and I think the general direction seemed right to me based upon our previous discussions. So overall, I like the flow of this much better than the previous one, because as you noted, we were kind of mixing serialization and deserialization together, and it wasn't clear which one we were talking about when, but having clear sections really, really helps. So I appreciate that. Anybody have any high-level questions? Okay. I think it's
Yeah,
just a matter of giving people one more week to review it, if you're okay with that, Daniel.
Yeah, that sounds great. I suggest reading it and also looking at John Skeet's comments. He does bring up a few questions that might be worth considering.
Okay, yeah, we'll do it through the issue itself, since people seem to be quiet today. Okay. Any last minute questions, comments on this before we move on to the next one? Okay, and thank you, Daniel, for taking another stab at it. Clemens, I'm hoping this one is an easy one that you opened up. This was one of your AIs, right?
Yeah. The we changed the origin. We mistakenly used the origin header, and we really wanted to have the web versus origin header. No, of course that's a breaking change. And I put this into the V1 branch too, 101. So that's probably the wrong place. But it's. I think we agreed that that was an error. And I think that's the only real way to resolve this too, that for it being an error, because the origin header, as defined in the core spec, is conflicting with this, which means we really need to get out of the way of the core spec. CORS, of course origin resource sharing.
Right. Okay. Does anybody have any, well, first things first, does anybody have any questions about the change itself? This seems consistent with what we've agreed to in the past. Do people agree, disagree? Okay. Not hearing any objection to the direction it's going. I guess my question here is which branches it goes into. I think, I can't remember, how many branches do we have? We have 101. Yeah, we should probably do it into both, the very latest one and then 101, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll create another PR for the other one. Go back. So, question for everybody: any objection then to approving this as just a mistake on our part, even though technically it is a breaking change, it is an error? Any objection to treating it as such, or objection to the change itself? Okay, not hearing any. I think it's been approved. So,
Yeah, I'll do that.
Master branch. Okay, whoops. Hey, fixed it. Cool. Okay, cool. Thank you, Clemens, for taking care of that AI. Okay. As I was going through doing prep work for the interop on Discovery, there are a couple of things I noticed that I thought might be worthy of changing. I actually think we talked about this before, but I honestly cannot remember what we said about it. Epoch was just an integer. Do we mean for it to be allowable to be a negative integer? I thought that was kind of funky. So that's why I just thought maybe we want to make it an unsigned 32-bit integer, but I wasn't sure if we talked about that before or not. Does anybody remember or have an opinion?
Unsigned seems right.
Okay. And the reason I picked 32 instead of 64 is because I think in code and in the cloud event spec itself, when we talk about integers, we make those 32-bit as well. So I thought consistency there would be good. So that's one change. And then obviously this must be 32-bit integers in the constraints. The other change was name must be a non-empty string. I thought that was an obvious one. This is just a typo, E versus A. This one was a little bit bigger. I didn't change the semantics. Instead, what I decided to do is add some language that says, let's see, the old text talked about where is it? Oh, here, this right here, and must reject any unsupported filters. I wanted to be a little more explicit with that. And what I did is I said, I want to be clear about what it should return, in this particular case, a 400 bad request. But then I also extended it to be not just unknown filters, but also unknown query parameters. Because if the user thinks this endpoint supports a custom query parameter, but it doesn't, I think it'd be a mistake for the client to think it's getting the semantics it wanted in terms of the data getting back, but it actually wasn't. So I decided to expand it to be all query parameters or filter processing. The other change in here was, I thought we need to make it clear. Let's see, where was it? Yeah, this language right here says, any service previously returned to the client that does not appear can assume to no longer be available. I thought that was a little bit too loosey-goosey. First of all, I want to make it clear that no longer available in the case of getting the full set back should be interpreted as a delete. But the other case is when you're doing a filter, I thought that it's not that it's necessarily deleted. It's just that the filter criteria no longer applies. Now it could have been deleted, but it also could be that they changed some attributes on the thing and it just doesn't match your search criteria anymore. So I didn't want people to assume that it necessarily meant delete. And that's what this paragraph down here is trying to say. So those were the set of changes. Ryan, your hand's up, you have a question?
I have a comment on rejecting requests with unsupported query parameters. My experience has been that being so draconian at that level doesn't always end well. Sometimes developers are using frameworks or they're using code that they actually don't have control over that might add query parameters to requests in HTTP library they have no control over. And I just feel like it's probably better to just not just for the server to ignore those rather than the server to completely reject the whole request. So that's just my input on that.
So on that one, if someone thought that they could query over, say, type, but the server doesn't actually support it, aren't you afraid of them getting back misleading results then?
Possibly, yeah, I am, but at the same time, like the practical realities of how much, how many times I've seen cases where the query parameters get added to requests that actually don't impact the results that get returned is high. So and maybe there's a middle ground here of maybe anything that is cloud events or discovery specific. If they request functionality that we know about, and the server doesn't support that, maybe we reject it in that case and we ignore everything else. But yeah, I just wanted to be a little bit careful with the language.
Okay, let me think about that one. Okay, Klaus, your hand's up.
Yeah, so this about the assumption that a service has been deleted reminds me of the scope discussion before, because you could just assume then that the service is not in that scope anymore, because there might always be, I would say, invisible query parameters like policies in place. So it might just be that the authorizations of the client have changed and the service is not visible anymore.
Right.
So what exactly would delete mean?
Right. Agreed. Yeah, I'm not sure I had the right language in there, but yes, those are the kind of cases I was worried about. Yes. Okay. So it sounds like I may need to go back and rethink this language down here some, based upon at least Ryan's comments. What about the other changes? Any concerns with the unsigned 32-bit change? And obviously this is a typo. But anything else up here look weird to people that I need to rethink? Okay, let me go back and rethink about this one and take Ryan's comments into account and see if I can come up with something that might be workable. Okay. Thank you all for the feedback. Clemens. We have 7 minutes left. Do you want to talk about this one or you want to postpone it because you're also feeling sick?
Postpone it.
Okay. Eric, with 7 minutes, do you want to talk about your discovery thing? Or I know you mentioned your internet's a little bit flaky. Do you want to wait or try now?
Let's go ahead and wait if we can.
Okay. Okay. Any other topics people want to bring up then? And Ahmed was supposed to go this week talking about the SQL query stuff, but he had to postpone it again. So hopefully next week he'll talk. But any other topics people want to bring up? Okay. I think I have everybody in the attendee list. Let me know if I missed you while you're looking at that. In the last 7 minutes, obviously you don't care about the interop call. You're free to leave, assuming I have you on the attendee list. But in the last 7 minutes, what I would like to say is I do have my test client ready to go. So I'm just waiting now for people to give me their endpoints to hit to start doing the little bit of interop testing we talked about on last week's call. And just to refresh your memory, since I think some of you were not there, all we're talking about doing is supporting these things. Just get all the services, get by ID, and get by name. Okay. And like I said, I have a client that tests it out, to test a whole different variants of this. For example, gets all services, then queries each one by ID, queries by the name, make sure you get back the same data, stuff like that, just basic testing. So just let me know when your endpoint's ready to go. Mine's out there. It is the URL that I pasted down here. So anyway, just a little bit of nagging reminder for anybody who's going to be doing an endpoint, okay?
Okay.
Well, yeah, thank you, Clemens. Yeah, I was thinking about you. But I don't know, Scott, you were thinking of one. I know your other things going on. I did ping Remy and he said he's going to be coming back. So hopefully he can resurrect his endpoint and we can start talking to that one too. Okay. Anything else you want to bring up about any topic? Let me just double check. I don't think there's an SDK topic. Anybody got anything? No. Okay. All right. In that case, I think we're done. Actually, a little bit early. Okay.
Hey, this is Madhavan.
Hey, hello.
Hey, I'm just integrating the NAT server with the cloud event. I'm just trying. At the time, I'm seeing only a Go language have the client library to integrate with the NAT server. So any pipeline going on for the Java clients side to integrate with the NAT server?
Anybody from the SDK side of the house know an answer to that question? Scott, Lance, or anybody else?
The Go SDK does integrate, but I don't know about the Java side.
You may want to try asking in the SDK Slack channel. Because to be honest with you, I can't remember offhand who the lead is of the Java SDK. I know we have one, I just can't remember who it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I will ask.
Yeah, if you ask there and you don't get an answer right away, I'll try to remember to look there and then I'll try to ping the right person to see if we can get you an answer.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, anything else you want to bring up? All right, cool. In that case, we are done for the day. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your week.
Thanks, Doug.
Bye, everybody.